I think I've decided, by the way, I'm going to start calling this podcast Soup of Wall Street for rich people that hate rich people, because sometimes it's kind of how I feel. I'm going to say it. I'm not really supposed to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. You're only here for one of like two reasons, either to gain insight on something or because you vehemently disagree with me about whatever. And I don't really care which one it is. Let's look at what we got, and then we're going to get into it. Here's the question. And this is something I've been thinking about because I just feel like everything I see on the internet, at least in certain corners of the internet, kind of feels like they're just asking this question in some backhanded way or another. And the question basically goes something like this. Is success actually worth it? And the only people who can really ask that question are people who are actually disciplined enough to define what success is to them and then do the work. And then when they got there, not move the goalposts. It's like, you know, the guy who says, I want to have $1 million by the time I'm 40. And then they make $1 million and they go, actually, I want $5 million or I want to, or whatever. Just make up the number. It doesn't even really matter. The point is, people always move the goalposts. They constantly move the goalposts for whatever goal they have. Okay. But there is a very small subset of people, maybe I'm included, I don't know, a very small subset of people who say, this is what I want. And they can tell you what they want like years in advance, like 5, 10, 25 years in advance. They can say, at this point in my life, I want to have this accomplished. And then I'll feel like I was a success. Okay. And there's a very small subset of people who do that and they hit their goal. And for whatever reason, they all get on the internet and they post about it. And they say, this is what I see. They say, I did what I set out to do, and it kind of doesn't really feel like I thought it would. Am I normal? You know, I saw a guy post on a FIRE subreddit, financially independent, retire early. He said, I'm 44 and I'm retired, and it doesn't feel like I think it was supposed to. Like I spent all my time, you know, saving all my money, and now I've hit this age, and all of a sudden, I have time because I'm retired, but I have nobody to spend it with. Should I have been spending my time on something else? That was basically the question. I saw another one, the guy who was 29 years old. He said, hey, I've done everything right since I was 22. I've saved a bunch of money into my 401k, my Roth IRA, but I have no money for a down payment. What should I do? And I think that these questions are really interesting for a few reasons. The first thing is that these people are setting goals for themselves when they're much younger, right? They're doing all the right things, checking the boxes to get to some state when they get older. And what they don't really account for when they do this, or at least what I see that they don't really account for when they do this type of exercise, is they don't really say, well, what if my life changes? You know, the 22-year-old who wants to set themselves up for an early retirement doesn't think about, well, I'm 22. Obviously, I can say when I'm 40 or when I'm 50, I want to be retired. That's an early retirement. But they don't really think about, well, what about the life that I want to have when I'm 30 or 35? Or all of these events that happen in between getting your first job and quitting, stopping work forever, getting married, having kids, paying for education, buying a house, selling a house, car, second house, you name it. They don't really think about that. They want to delay gratification so much that all of a sudden they've kind of pigeonholed themselves into like a very small box. And I just don't think that you can account for flexibility in life, like in general. Okay. Maybe this is where this talk's going to go. I don't know. But I've been thinking about this idea, is success worth it? Other questions that are kind of in the same vein, things that people ask about, is an MBA worth it? Because that's basically the same thing, right? It's somebody who's 22 years old, graduating college and saying, hey, you know what? I want to be successful. And I want to be successful so bad. I'm going to spend 2 more years of my life and $100,000 or whatever it is. And I'm going to get something that is basically impossible to quantify. It's true. How are you going to quantify it? The difference between the job I was going to get versus the job that I think I'm going to get in the future, it's all a risk. Or meet these people that maybe I would have met without going to grad school, but maybe I could have met them on my own, or different people of similar caliber on my own while I was spending years, 22 and 23 and 24 working. I don't know. Should I get an MBA? Because I want to be successful? Is it worth it? I would certainly say that getting something like an MBA is not going to be worth it if your definition of success is I want to get as much money as I can by the time I'm like 30. It's not going to happen. MBA is really good at getting you a job. And in many cases, it's good at getting you a really good job. But the vast majority of people who have a lot of money, and define a lot of money however you want, I don't even really care. The vast majority of people who have a lot of money by the time they're 30 didn't do so because they were really good at their job. I'm just going to tell you, even if you had a job and that's the vehicle through which you accumulated your wealth, I promise you, you didn't make that money because you were really good at your job. You made that money because you got equity in a company and the company did really well. Or you built a company that other people executed on and was able to create some enterprise value. But at that level, that's not really a job. That's creating something. Job's completely different. See, a job is just doing a list of things for somebody else and executing on them very well and creating more value than you're paid. And sometimes you can get paid really good doing that, but I promise you that anybody who's made a ton of money by 30 didn't do so because they were really good at their job. It's usually because they were good at other things. See, I told you, you either came here for insight or you came in here because you vehemently disagree with some stuff. Thanks for listening. Is an MBA worth it? It's probably worth it if you want to raise the floor of your potential. I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. If your income floor was 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever it was, you might be able to add something to that floor. It's going to cost you 2 years and $100,000, but you might be able to add to that floor of potential. I think that's a reasonable way to think about it. I don't know that I would go get an MBA with the guarantee that you're going to network and you're going to meet certain people and you're going to get in certain circles. I don't know if that's a good way to look at it. It might be. It might be a good way to look at getting an education on what social norms are like in certain circles for people who didn't grow up in that environment. I'll tell you, being around money is weird as shit. Okay. I think I've decided, by the way, I'm going to start calling this podcast Soup of Wall Street for rich people that hate rich people, because sometimes that's kind of how I feel. Money is just weird, like the way people act around it. And sometimes you're just not going to be exposed to that unless you put yourself in certain circles that maybe something like an MBA might expose you to. I remember the very first time I went to a charity gala. And I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, let's, go to the civic center around the corner and, raise a couple $100 for the food bank or whatever. I'm talking about like going to a charity gala and there's tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars being sold in these auctions in like 38 seconds. Don't raise your hand. You better not sneeze, because you might actually spend 50 grand on some random ass safari to the middle of nowhere in Africa. It's real. I remember like one time, legit, no joke. I went to one of these. This was like the first one I went to, and the auctioneer guy like kind of said that like as a joke, like, "Hey, you better not sneeze. Not a good time for a selfie." And I just did something. I don't even know what I did. I raised my hand in some capacity. I'll put it that way. And um, they were like all over me instantly. And I was in on this auction for like 32 grand, and I didn't even know what it was. And it's not like I could tell the guy, "Hey, actually I was just kidding," because there are like hundreds and hundreds of people at this event. And it hung on me for like a solid 2 minutes, which feels like eternity, by the way, in one of those things. And I legitimately thought I was going to have to figure out how to pay for this because I was going to have to crowdfund it for sure. Somebody else got it. It wasn't on me. I moved on. But the point is, sometimes you kind of have to be exposed to that type of world to understand how those people think, to understand what it's like. It's just a game to them. That wasn't a game to me at that point in time. Like that would have severely changed my financial outlook, let's say, in that period in my life. But to everybody else, it was a game. Like they were just looking at me kind of laughing. Like, haha, oh, look, that kid's in for 30 grand on some random safari. Yeah, and if they had hung on me, it would have been a whole different conversation. But I think I learned something by doing that. And I don't know how else I would have learned it by other than by sitting in that room in a charity auction where they're selling random packages for tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I literally saw a package, mind you, that started for $1 million. $1 million charity auction. Do you know who can spend $1 million on a charity auction? Not a lot of people, I'll tell you that. It's usually not people who are buying these things because that charity package that sold for $1 million was like a private excursion to an island. Like you got the entire island, private jets and 100 people and like food and entertainment for an island. First off, I don't know who has $1 million to spend on a party like that. Second off, who knows 100 people that they can just invite to an island? Like, are you kidding me? I have no idea where I would come up with 100 people that I even want to spend that much time with. But that's the whole point of money for so many people. It's just to show it off to other people like it's a game. And hey, let me invite you to this thing that A, I spent a lot of money on in a very public manner. And then B, you can see how nice it is, all these things that I can get with my money. And you know what? Some of these norms you only just learn by being around other money. I don't know what to say. I didn't bid on the $1 million package. I didn't bid on the $30,000 package either. But maybe getting an MBA is worth it if you think it's important to be around this. The thing with an MBA or like setting any sort of career path, honestly, when you're 22, is that in order for it to work, in order for your MBA to work, quote unquote, by the book, you actually have to do the things that your MBA sets you up to do. Right? Like if I go get my MBA and spend 2 years so that I can become a whatever investment banker. And after 2 years, I go, you know what? I think I'd rather be a barista. It's probably not a very good use of my time. Or who knows, go be a like editor at a book publisher or something. Not a very good use of time. Now, some people need to spend that time in order to figure out who they really are and what they like. And sometimes you figure out what you like by doing something that you really hate. But there's a lot of risk in getting an MBA, especially straight out of school, if you really want to make it worth it. For most people, it probably makes a lot more sense to go get a job first and figure out what you either like or don't like so that you can spend your time in a more constructive manner. Maybe a few years after you had a job. I'll say it. Okay. So is success worth it or is chasing success worth it? I would say that it can be if you are really committed to exactly what you want and you spend all of your time, energy, and effort on that thing and you're willing to not move the goalposts. It's really hard to do that though, because you don't really know what it's like once you kind of get to the proverbial goalposts. And what I find is that most people, when they get there, they actually kind of just realized they liked the chase the whole time. Like, that's the fun part. That's what makes you who you are. That's what gives you your character. All the time, energy, and effort you spend on getting to the end. And then all of a sudden, when you take that away, the essence of your character, and you replace that just with a bag of money, you're kind of like an empty shell. You don't have any more purpose. I sold my company. I can't do it anymore. I've got a bag of money to replace it. You're not the same thing. So I think that's why a lot of people get really frustrated. And in my experience, what you find is you see people who do the whole thing, have the proverbial success, get the bag of money. They spend like 6 months or a year, however many years, just living, doing nothing, and they have to get back in the game. They have to get back in the game because the things that gives most people that satisfaction is not actually the money, it's the game. They live for the game. And you know what? I kind of don't hate it. I'll say it. The best people in the world who are doing the best job at whatever they're doing have in many cases kind of already gotten their bag. Here's another thing I think that's hilarious. This is like the same idea as like rich people, but like hating rich people is another like really fancy trend that I find is that people get their money and then we all have to do this thing where when you get your money, you have to show other people that you have your money. So that's why people go to these charity things, or, you know, they invite people on the things that they win at the charity thing, or better yet, they invest in real estate. Real estate. Real estate to me is basically a social investment. Functionally, it's nothing more. Unless you are a real estate professional who actually knows what you're doing, real estate as an investment for most people is designed to do two things: make money for the GP and serve some sort of functional purpose to the tenant. Everybody else is usually kind of just holding the bag. And the reason that people like to invest in real estate, certainly as passive, limited partners, is because they like to be able to drive down the street and say, oh yeah, I helped with that project. Oh yeah, you know, on this corner, that pile of dirt's going to become whatever. They like to be in the know. And the only way you can be in the know is if you have enough money to open the door. And when you can participate in these private placements that have $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 minimums, it gets you into the door to just being able to have the information. And so for whatever reason, some people just like to have the information so they can lord over everybody else with this small piece of completely irrelevant information that nobody else has access to. That's how real estate works. You're welcome for that one. I'm going to get in trouble, aren't I now? Okay, whatever. Here's now my advice. Is success worth it? Well, I think it is, but I think that success, it just can't be like the end objective. Like, I can't be like, oh, I'm not successful until I do X. Like, there has to be something that's different than that, right? Like, at some level, I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm doing all the things that I wanted to do. I am the person who I said I was going to become. I am successful. Now, if you're blowing smoke up your ass and you're a total cheese ball, like, doesn't work. But if you're actually legitimately doing things and you're actually legitimately on the path toward whatever your goalposts are, you have to like take a minute and step out for a second and go, damn, this is the good stuff, right? It is. Because I swear that people get to the end, and I've seen it so often, and they go freaking psycho, or they invest in real estate, or they try to just get back in the game because they miss it so much. So like while you're in the game, I think the best people, personally, the people who I like aspire to be the most are the people who are in the game, but are willing and able to set boundaries for the game in their life. Like they're willing to realize, oh, while I'm young and I'm the healthiest I'm ever going to be, I can do the most things I'm ever able to do physically. I have the most energy I'm ever going to have. Like, you're just not going to have the same energy when you're 45 as you do when you're 25. It's just a fact. So the people who are younger and are willing to say, I'm going to draw the line because I am a success. Maybe I haven't gotten to the goalposts yet, but I'm doing everything I need to do. And I'm going to use whatever I have to enjoy the life that I want now. This is like a very much like a Die with Zero book type idea, but I think that it's so true, because if you give something like just total authority over your life, or you don't draw boundaries, like at least for me, I know I can just sit here and work all day if I don't turn it off, because I can, because there's, especially if somebody's like has an active brain and successful or whatever, like you're always going to find the next thing to do and the next thing to do and the next thing to do, or I'm going to start this next thing, and it never freaking ends. But if you can just turn it off for a second, go outside. Yeah, go outside. Who cares? In the middle of the day. Wow. While the market's open. Oh my God. Relax. Reinvest your time in the things you enjoy. You can probably do that forever. You can do that sustainably. How about that? Sustainably. This is what I think about my own business. So like my business, we give advice. That's my job. People pay me to tell them what to do. I know, it's crazy, but we give advice for a living. And I sent out an email this week to all of our clients. And I said, hey guys, we've been growing. It's been really great. Thanks for everything. I've been really thinking about what it means to grow sustainably. And I figured out in our business, to grow sustainably means two things. Again, my business is advice. Two things we have to do. We have to give good advice, okay? And we have to stay in business. That's it. So for me, staying in business means that whatever I'm doing has to be able to scale like basically infinitely. If I'm doing something that I can't do all the time, I don't know, working 80-hour weeks or 7 days a week or wherever you draw the line, I can't work 80 hours a week and scale that infinitely. I just can't. I can't bend over backwards to serve every single person's last need ever at the expense of my best clients. I can't take on 1 million clients a year. It's just impossible. So you got to really take an inventory of your time and your objectives and say, okay, the first thing in my business is I got to give good advice. If I don't give good advice, nothing works. The whole thing's broken. And then take an inventory of what you're actually doing to make sure that you're actually doing something that's sustainable. And I think what's sustainable in different periods of your life is probably different depending on where you are. Sometimes you're in the grow mode and you got to work 80 hours a week. And as long as you know that it's sustainable only for a period, then you can kind of transition eventually to the preserve mode, preserve what I've got, because you can't keep chasing the next thing at the expense of what you've already got. But it's a conscious shift to be able to do that. And I think when you can get into that mode, that's where you can kind of start to do your activity, do your business, do whatever it is, and sustain it indefinitely, draw boundaries, and enjoy the rest of your life, okay? Don't get an MBA unless you really want to. I don't really care what you do, but if you made it this far, you listen to the whole thing. So I guess that's something we have in common. That's it for today. If you have any questions or you really want me to talk about something else next, send me an email, soup@wallstreet, and we'll see you next time.